Hey everybody, and welcome to Grad Student Book Reviews, where we take an academic work and we dissect its thesis and main arguments in 5 minutes or less. All right, today's work is Imperial America, American Foreign Policy Since 1898 by Lloyd Gardner. All right, and Gardner argues that starting with the Spanish-American War in 1898, that America is definitely an empire. All right, not only is it an empire, but it's the largest and most powerful empire in the modern world. He argues this based on America's economic policies and our ability to influence the internal workings of other governments using diplomacy and economic foreign policy. Gardner also argues that this free market economic policy does sometimes conflict with the ideals of liberty, specifically using a Marxist point of view, and these ideals need to be consolidated with other American ideologies that justify expansionism and thus imperialism. That job is left to the politicians. All right, so that's the basic argument here, is that America is definitely an imperial nation, and we do it by influencing other governments internally. All right, he starts this way back in 1877 with the McKinley Tariff, and that's kind of the original repercussions of economic expansion, right? Noting that foreign markets need to have reciprocity. Right? They need to be reciprocal to gain mutual economic benefits, right? And he says that by doing this, this increased American interventionism. Now he focuses mostly on the Pacific here. He focuses on Cuba, the Philippines, Hawaii, Guam, Wake Island even, as these are stepping stones across the Pacific to free trade with Asia. He also looks a little bit at the Panama Canal and the Banana Republics, and saying that there is firm evidence here of American imperialism based on economic motives that even outpaced European intervention in the Pacific and South America. So that's really where he looks right there. Now he does take this to the open door policy, right? And he says that the open door policy in Asia are a method for us to vie for free trade, right? He incorporates World War I here, but he does not really focus on the European theater of World War I. And he's really showing that the U.S. is really trying to intermingle with China, Japan, and Russia in the Pacific for economic benefit. Now, he carries this on a little bit to Wilsonian politics in the Versailles Treaty and the League of Nations, saying that this is the U.S.'s chances to really meddle in foreign affairs that the Senate rejects because they don't want to be tied up in unwieldy alliances. But he does carry the same line of thought through World War I, into the interwar years and the Depression. And the Depression brought about a debate in international finance, right? International economics. Some thought that economic expansionism was the cause of the Depression. Others disagreed and said it would be the cure. But nonetheless, there's a lot of talk in the interwar years about our economic imperialism. They didn't use the word imperialism at the time, but that's when it was. Gardner actually introduces a term called intranationalism. And he said that's a way for American politicians and diplomats to tell the world to adopt the U.S. style of liberty as a way to escape from economic catastrophe. Right? So really, diplomats use their collective economic bargaining powers to coerce nations to go along with U.S. trade law. Right? And if they did that, then it was great, and we had economic reciprocity, and things could benefit both nations. If they did not, then we could use economic sanctions against them, and that's exactly what happened to Japan prior to World War II, when we used sanctions to send an imperial message to them. Gardner does bring this into World War II and further, and he uses the Lend-Lease Act as evidence for economic imperialism into Europe, and then he continues it post-World War II with the Truman Doctrine and Marshall Plan. He does bring this into Korea and Vietnam, justifying American expansionism throughout world affairs, kind of saying it backfires throughout the Cold War, and that's really the biggest weakness of his argument, is the Cold War. His Cold War economic imperial argument is not as convincing when you bring in the nuclear arms race. It's just not as well thought out, not as well evidenced, I guess. Probably mostly because this book is written in 1976, so they didn't have as much historical evidence. Nonetheless, that's his main argument. And if you agree, go ahead and put it in the comments. If you disagree, put that in the comments as well. And in any case, subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys later.